Okay, we're now back in open session, and I do apologize for the lengthy time of the closed session. There was just a lot to go over tonight. I think first, we will give any of the board members that attended the school conference in Chicago an opportunity to pass along anything they may have learned or any comment they might have. So, anyone want to have any comments?
As always, I found it to be a really good learning experience. Beyond that, anything else I'd say would might not make a lot of sense to
I
us.
sat in on, I did a day of collective bargaining. I learned a lot there, and then my other one was on finance and financials, and I hope to better understand the account numbers and where they are going to. Also, the audit, I would recommend, according to them, that we do have an auditor, the auditor that did our audit, do a presentation as part of our.
Okay. We can still do that.
Yeah,
if you want
I
to.
think that we should.
Want to do that
I
for
mean,
December? I can try to
Yeah.
get that
Set
done.
it up, yeah.
I took an all-day class on Friday in professional development and leadership training, and also in the performance evaluation reform of HERA. I think some of y'all might know what's coming on down that way. And also on Saturday, I trained, went to proper school board meetings, and then I just got to sit in on one of the teachers' evaluation things. So I appreciate the opportunity to go up there and maybe next year if I get in again, I'll be able to learn more. But it's a worthwhile trip. Like I said, I'm a new board member, and I learned a lot. There's still a lot to learn.
One session I went to was on school safety, and it made me proud though, because I think Massac's way ahead of the presenter that was talking about what we have with our fire department, with our police, and I was proud of that.
I just picked up on a couple of the sessions I attended. You can pass these back around. Called The Art of School Boarding. I thought it was very meaningful, even though I've been on the board for a lot of years. It was just a good reminder, something you all can look at. Talks about the top 10 rules of a school board, what their main job and position is for a school district. And then also I attended one on school safety. I attended the one that presentation that Steve Webb from Goreville. Has he ever been down at did his presentation at Massac? I thought he had. Done an excellent job. It would be something I would advise every school district, every rural school district, to hear his presentation, because it was, very meaningful. So we do appreciate the opportunity to went up there. It was a very worthwhile trip, I believe. Next on the agenda is any of the public comment or anyone from the NCEA. Next is, I think, Mr. Hayes and Mr. Conkle to do a presentation on our PERS scores.
Park scores.
Park scores.
Yeah.
Whoever wants to.
Get this going.
Oh, you're right.
I have a question before you even get started. The handout we got, this report card, talks about math. Does Park not also measure reading?
It's in the ELA, English Language Arts.
Okay, so that's, okay, I misinterpreted ELA. Okay.
As I said, it always said reading. They've changed that. Linda, if you were looking for something different.
I was, and
Within the last couple of years.
okay.
Okay, so, Mr. Smith asked us to review some of the park scores. We finally have 2 years of the park data, as we've done the test for 2 years now in the state of Illinois. So, we haven't done this in a while, and when JR and I started talking about this, we realized some of you were not on the board last time we presented scores like this, because we've had a change in everything. So, we're gonna give you a little bit of background on how we analyze it, look at some of the past data and current park scores, and highlight some positives, and obviously there's some areas we can improve upon, and then if you have any questions, just stop us. So, you wanna do it?
Kind of go into some of the background of the data analysis that we do when we're going through the park scores of some of the comparisons that we look at on a yearly basis, okay? There's really 4 things that we kind of look at each year. One of them is a state average comparison. And I want to mention that for a couple purposes. One, that the state average is important so that we know how we compare to everybody else in the state, okay? You know, easily enough. But also, one thing with the state average is that is the one constant, one benchmark that we can use to tell exactly how we're doing. So often the state, over time, they have changed cut scores. So maybe the percent that you meet or exceed on state tests, that may not mean just a whole lot. For an example, in 2006, all of a sudden we had a huge jump in our percent meet and exceed. And as we did have a growth year that year, but it wasn't as high as what percent meet and exceed showed. What happened was the state pretty much just lowered their cut scores for the No Child Left Behind. But with that being said, we were able to go back and look at, you know, how are we above or below state average, and that's a comparison. Back in 2013, they started adding Common Core items to the test. You had a dip there. Although it looked like things were going south, it was much different once you started looking at the state average and how you compared below or above the state average. And then once again, the last 2 years, once we've gone to park, that is a different test altogether. But the one thing that doesn't change is how do we compare above or below what everybody else is doing, because they're taking the same test, other than just one little thing with whether they're taking it online or on paper. That's really the only difference with the park right now. So those are some of the state, and why we look at state average, really even more than the percent meets or exceeds. On the year-by-year comparison, that's another thing we take a look at. We try to identify the effectiveness of our curriculum and our instruction through that by looking at year-by-year how we're doing. Is it working? Is it not working? Okay. Thirdly, looking at the grade level comparisons, we try to identify successes and areas for improvement related to vertical alignment. 3rd to 4th grade, 4th to 5th, are there any gaps there that we're leaving out? Those are things that we look at yearly. And also that try to identify with that, are there classrooms, are there certain grade levels that we notice, wow, they're really doing something successful here. And maybe that's something that we can do, maybe something that we can copy from and share with everyone else. Another reason why we look at the grade level. And then lastly, the class and longitudinal comparison is really tracking the students' progress. You know, maybe in 2014 it's 3rd grade, 2015 it's 3rd and 4th, and then on up each year. That allows us to track how they're doing each year. And once again, it's important to look at the state averages, the comparison for state average in this, because even from grade level to grade level, the percent meet and exceed the average amongst the state, that may change with grade level. For example, right now, 5th grade is something that is the state average is a little bit lower. So if you just look at the number of percent meets, it's kind of misleading at times. Okay, and you'll notice that here in just a moment in the charts that we've got. This right here is a chart dating back to 2002. And this is all Massac state testing. Back in 2002, it wouldn't have been every grade, because not every grade tested at that time. There were some grades that tested social sciences, social studies and science, maybe didn't reading and math. But all the tests from 3rd grade up through high school, that is how, through the years that we've compared above or below the state average. I mentioned earlier about 2006 being one. We actually made a 4% gain. We actually made over a 12% gain in the meets and exceeds percentage. So it was a little bit misleading on that. Whereas in 2013, we have a big jump there. The interesting part about that is that that was the introduction of Common Core into the ISAT testing. That was the first year they started introducing some of the Common Core items into the ISAT testing. Good news about that, we did very well with that compared to the state average. Looking at 2015, well, that's a head scratcher right there. I'm not real sure. Kind of expected that one to go up, or at least stay up there as it did in 13 or 14, but good news is we seem to be climbing back up this last year as we're up 2.6% from the previous year.
And I think you're always going to have these ups and downs when you look at this stuff. If you were to draw a trend line, our teachers have been doing a very good year of really figuring out ISAT and improving the scores over time, all the way across. And now, of course, this is the first year of Park, and so it's kind of back to the drawing board kind of thing. But you could see how where we started and where it was going, and if the state would have changed it, we'd probably still be going up in that direction. But now we have to regroup a little bit. So.
I suspect in a couple of years you'll see that trend line start to maneuver the same way with the Park. Our teachers do an excellent job of making those adjustments along the way.
So when we look at some of the multi-year stuff, this one's a little bit harder to look at, but we just try to look at trends, and it's kind of interesting to see how all the grade levels kind of trend together, especially with Park. The high school has traditionally always been lower than elementary. All those years, the high school test included the ACT, and now it's going to include SAT. So one of the things you have to keep in mind, all these years are here, the 13, 14 were ACT. The last 2 years didn't have either. It was just Park, and now we're not doing Park anymore at high school. It's just going to be SAT, which is a new animal. But kind of interesting. If you look at the reading and then math, one of the interesting things, I think our district does a very good job, especially at the elementary level. Our math scores are generally higher than the ELA scores, or reading, they used to call it, at all the elementaries, and that's not true throughout the state. That's an anomaly. Most of the state scores, the averages are lower for math than reading, because kids read a lot more on average in all their subjects, and they only do math and math. But our teachers do a very good job of that. Of course, it flip-flops back at the high school level, especially when we're doing the ACT. So then we're always higher at language arts than we are math at the high school level, which is true across the state as well. We looked at some of the Park stuff. This was our first year of Park, and this is an example of when we look at all the grade levels and just try to compare it to the state average. And so you can kind of look through there. We have some positives out of this, and obviously some areas we need to work on. But when you start looking at that, it's pretty impressive. We have a lot of schools, a lot of grade levels that are exceeding the state average across the state, and you're talking about a lot of kids being tested there. And that was the very first year of Park. Obviously, JR said he'd expect us to be a little bit higher than state average because we had worked on it a little bit, but still it was our first year. And we were still overall above the state average. So.
One of the things that we've talked about with that is the last 2 years is we have tried to get more students taking it online, and that's definitely where we are with the state. Mr. Smith remembers one of the first questions Dr. Tony Smith asked whenever he visited a few weeks ago. Are y'all taking all the tests online? Can I see your computer lab? That was definitely a concern of his. But what doesn't take an effect are some of the other schools, and we know that some of them are getting waivers to take them on paper versus online, but it's definitely moving in that direction.
Yeah, and the point is that taking it on a computer is is a different animal than on the piece of paper that they're used to. So a lot of these things, you have to scroll and manipulate things on a computer screen that on paper you just read it. So there's a level of complexity that is added to it.
We're working with the kids on just the testing strategy, the strategy of taking the test online and how to maneuver that. And I suspect they're going to get better at that as we go forward.
They're typically better than us anyway. So we have the first year of ELA and math on there, and there's a bigger handout with all that in there. We just wanted to show you some of the grade level comparisons we've been looking at. And then when you look at 2016, you can kind of make some comparisons there at the grade levels. You can see a lot of the grade levels made improvements from 15 to 16, especially in math. And that's one of the things I know everyone's tired of hearing about Common Core math and the PART test. It does test Common Core math, and it's obvious to me that our teachers are figuring out how to teach it and our kids are learning it because we're improving in math on that. So I know it's a headache for everybody, but it does seem to be working. And when you look at some of the others, this is an example of a 2-year analysis when we just look at the program strength. So for example, at the 8th grade, this is one sample, there's others in there. But we try to look at the same kids over 2 years just to see how they're doing from year to year. So we do have some mobility. We looked at our report card, our mobility's actually dropped in the last few years. Surprised me, I didn't realize that.
What is it, you know?
Well, do you remember what it was? If you looked at it,
I want to say 14%.
14.
That's what I would thought.
Yeah, it's gone down, but our free reduced lunch has gone up.
Right, we were looking at that in the last 5 years. The state, from 5 years ago till now to 2016, the number of the state average went up 1%, while ours went up 8% during that same 5-year period. The amount of students that fall into the low-income category, which I do think says a whole lot for the teachers, that during that time, as that subcategory is going up, the scores are still remaining solid.
And there's definitely an added challenge to some of that.
Can I ask you a question, because I really don't know the answer to this? Low-income students, are they considered poverty students? Is that an equation?
Those are two
You might
different-
know that,
two
yeah,
different
better than me, I
categories.
don't know.
Yeah, if they get, it's not necessarily.
Wait, here's the reason I ask, is because I know that there's a lot of discussion projecting out where the Department of Education is going after January. And the promise that Mr. Trump made is that there are 11 million students in poverty, and every one of them will get a chance at school choice, which means they will take a $12,000 voucher from the local public school and take it to wherever they want to go. That's going to be their option, and they think that that money will have to come from Title I to be able to fund that. Those are just things I've been reading, and so, and when I see our low income count being starting to creep up to close to 70%, and I think, well, if that's poverty, we're in trouble. I'm gonna start a school, for crying out loud. That'd be a great income, but to do that, if kids can just take $12,000 out of the local school and go with it.
I think the criteria for reduced lunch is a separate criteria than just living below poverty.
So does anybody know what the poverty count actually is in Massac County?
Well, the free and reduced lunch, if they're eligible for SNAP benefits, which is food stamps or TANF cash, they automatically get it. Otherwise, they have to provide verification of their income, and their income has to be at a certain level of the federal poverty level.
One addition to that I've just learned about in the last month, it just came on our last month's report. Any students that are receiving Medicaid benefits automatically qualify
That's good.
within the last month.
Well, there's a whole lot more of those.
The poverty count
Mhm.
comes from the census, which is so very inaccurate. It is just not, there's no way that's really indicative. But, because I wrote for a grant and it required your poverty count. And when I looked that up, we didn't, Cessna didn't qualify, which was crazy because I knew they had to. Because I was looking at free and reduced lunch, and the poverty counts come from the census.
So it's probably gonna, which is a raw number for a county or an area, whatever they define. But this would have to come down to, this child lives in poverty, he's entitled or she's entitled to $12,000 to take out, and how in the world do you determine what that number is you start looking in the future, see how much income you can lose from kids taking it away and going to a private school, or they could probably even take it across the river, $12,000. That would certainly cover tuition, or they could go to any other. Now, on the other hand, we could get kids coming in here. It could work in reverse, and maybe the whole thing would equal out. I don't know. So, just wondered. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your presentation there.
Good question. Like this chart, these are the same kids. So when you look at the kids when they were in 7th grade, and then the same kids, roughly the same kids, obviously with some mobility, go to the 8th grade, we look for them to continue to make improvements. Sometimes it goes backwards, and then we have to look at what's going on there. And 9 times out of 10, anytime we see it go backwards, it's almost always a curriculum problem, not a teacher problem. Just if you're not teaching the stuff that's on the test, the kids aren't going to perform well on the test, and that's what we find over and over. And that's the kind of variance we've tried to eliminate over the years with the ISAT, and trying to get to make sure, the variance in how you teach is good, but what you teach is bad, because that leads to variance in the results. So there's good and bad variance, and we try to eliminate the bad. But that's one example, and there's others in that one packet. Did everybody get that other packet? I have other copies of that one.
So you're saying that, when they do these testings on certain, they don't tell you what curriculum you need to be studying, or?
They don't provide the curriculum for you. They provide standards, like the Common Core, and things that you're supposed to be able to interpret and pull out and then implement it within your curriculum, and our teachers do that.
The test is based on the conference.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you want to go over some of the positives?
Just some of the positive highlights. 2.6% district-wide improvement on the 2016 part. We mentioned earlier how, this is the second year with park. I would not be shocked if we don't see another little improvement, or at least a steady rise over time as the teachers become more familiar with park, and what the expectations for it are. Also, the high school was above the state average in math and English language arts this year. Very good improvement in math this year. In the next one, I'll try to explain this one. Of the 5 elementary schools, grades 3, 4, 5, and 6, there's 20 grades there with them all. In math, in 2016, 17 of the 20 were above the state average in math. And we mentioned earlier about the improvement is occurring despite an 8% increase in free reduced lunch over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and that, one of the things I should probably mention is our math area. We had a select group of kids taking the math on the park last year, so that's part of why that was so high, but we're not normally that high, but it's still, those kids are doing. JR pulled this up. He uses this for years now, I guess you've used.
A few years.
Yeah. There's different sites like this online that rate, they kind of rank school districts. This one does it based on your test scores. They put all the test scores together, normalize them, and then they rank them based on test scores. And so basically, they look at a lot of what we're talking about. How far are you from other schools? How did you do compared to other schools in your state?
In looking at, we kind of pulled out our ROE 21, which is Franklin, Williamson, Johnson, and Massac. At the elementary level, Massac has the top 3 ranked elementary school in that region, that 4-county region. And then the high school is ranked 4th. And the neat thing about that is when you're looking at the low income, a lot of times what I also look at when I'm looking at those things is I look at, okay, that school is there. Let's look at what their low income is. Let's look at what their demographics are. And we compare very well when you start to look at our low income percentages compared to some of the other schools. We do well with that.
We're 4th out of how many?
All of these, we're 4th out of all the ones in our ROE, but we're also 4th out of all these I've put on this list, which is all of our conference schools that we play in IHSA, and also other schools nearby, just so you can kind of look and compare the rankings on the left. And you can look this up on that website. And on the right is our percent free reduced lunch. So for example, Carterville's ahead of us in our ROE, but their free reduced lunch is significantly lower in that school.
For some reason, Frankfurt launched from.
Yeah, Frankfurt just jumped up there. They were really low last year, but they did very, very well on their park tests last year. So for whatever reason, they jumped ahead. And Carbondale always does pretty well.
So do we have any, probably not solutions, but ideas on how we can increase our scores in schools that we needed?
Yeah, and that's when you kind of have to look at that other packet to kind of go through that, and that's not something that we probably just need to go through. But that's the work that we do on those half days, or we used to do on the half. We haven't had a lot of them this year, but trying to get some of the bad variants out. And that's really important now with the park. As we get more data back, we'll be able to do more with that to try to analyze it and look at what areas we need to hit. For example, 5th grade is low across the state, but it's also our lowest grade. And as I said before, that's typically a curriculum problem, not a teacher problem. We need to look at 5th grade pretty hard there and see, especially on the math, and the whole state does obviously as well, because it's down compared to a lot of the others. And that test can be a little bit more difficult too. But there are you gotta get a little bit deeper in the individual classrooms before you can do that.
And something that you'll probably see on the next slide is at the elementary level is the English language arts. We seem to be performing better at math right now than we are at that. And we've made more changes, more adaptations along the way with math, so that's something that we really have to start to look at.
And math is where we started. I mean, I can remember, I guess it's been 16 years ago, math was, we had hit an all-time low at middle school and junior high. And we got on a watch list at junior high, I believe, and, or warning, whatever the worst one is. And, so we started with math because that's where we were, and just kind of grew from there district-wide. And we are still consistently better at math throughout those lower grades than ELA, and that's unusual because if you look at most schools, it's the other way around. So there's definitely room for improvement in the ELA. And there's also a little bit more variance in our results post-park, but that's to be expected because we haven't figured out all of what, there's certain parts of the Common Core that it tests more heavily in different grades, and it takes time for teachers to identify that, make sure they work it into the curriculum. Elementary teachers I know at the 5th and 6th grade level have been struggling with the Common Core math because they push so many of those concepts that used to be taught later on down to them, and so it takes a while to figure all that out. And then also the SAT. That's going to be a big one for us this year. I'm not sure if I shared this with Mr. Smith or not. I don't remember. We did a practice test for the SAT.
I've seen the results. We talked a lot about that. You were going to take the test. But
Yeah, we did one practice test because most of us, in fact, I think there's only one teacher in the whole school that's even ever taken the SAT because we're in an ACT region, and the SAT is a different animal completely. So we did a practice test that the SAT people provided, and they also provide the scoring mechanism for it. It's an app, and this is how we fared compared to their benchmarks, which is typical. Reading is a lot higher than math, obviously. The SAT consists of two language, they call them reading and writing tests, and then there's two math tests, one with a calculator, one without. So it's completely different than the ACT. There's no science component like on the ACT, and the math, you use a calculator on the ACT. So it's pretty different, and then there's also a writing component. And it took us almost all day to do the practice test. So it's just a different animal. Definitely have areas that we need to work on there.
however, and I'll let you speak to this, we can actually start doing these predictive SAT things in the 8th grade now, though, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
Mr. Smith agreed to let us start with that. Just like ACT used to have the Explore plan and ACT, some of you might remember that. They used to,
Oh, the pre-SAT.
Yeah.
Actually.
and now they have
Pre-ACT.
a PSAT that they've always given for the National Merit Scholarship, and that's still there for sophomores and some juniors. And they also offer a version for 8th grade and 9th grade now, so we're going to give the 8th grade this spring about the same time our juniors take the real SAT, so we can start getting some benchmarks on that. Because again, it's a different animal. That's one of the things you always got to remember. For whatever reason, in Illinois, elementary tests and what they measure has always been completely different at the high school. We always used the ACT before, now we're using the SAT. And the only good news is the SAT does line up more with the park stuff. And if you look at the SAT, the questions seem more like some of the park stuff that we've looked at all the way down to the elementary level, the way the questions posed and the way they ask things. So there'll be a little bit more alignment, hopefully, between the SAT and the park tests than there used to be with the ACT and ISAT. Probably not much.
Are students still having to take the SAT test for colleges?
Well, that's the big question right now. A lot of colleges have been saying they're going to start accepting the SAT that traditionally hadn't. I'm not sure where everyone stands on that. I know right now we still have kids signed up on their own taking the ACT more than ever now because they don't get one as a junior anymore, and they're going to get the SAT. But they did come out with a really neat comparison from the College Board that I know at least some people are talking about using it, so it converts an SAT score to what it would be a comparable ACT score. So I don't know if colleges, I haven't read anywhere if they're going to start using that conversion table or if they're just going to start accepting the SAT. I don't know. This is all pretty new deal for us in Illinois.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you for your time. Very good presentation. Very good.
Yes, it was, thank you.
Good. Everything up. Next on the agenda is need a motion for a consent agenda for the minutes of October 24th and the November 1st, 2016 minutes. All bills that are due and payable and our treasurer's report. We have a motion for this.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Please roll call.
Ms. Grace?
Yes.
Ms. Rushing?
Yes.
Mr. Summers?
Yes.
Mr. Souders?
Yes.
Ms. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes. Next is our superintendent report.
Okay, any questions on the enrollment summary for the month?
Appreciate being in the packet.
Okay, we talk a lot about unfunded mandates, so what are they? I found this on the, actually, it's the School Board Association website.
Very interesting.
And, yeah, so an unfunded mandate means the government says you're gonna do it. Well, let me give you an example. When the state of Illinois said, we are going to bus students who are a mile away from the school, and the state bought the buses and gave us the money for the drivers and bought the gas and everything, because they said, if we're gonna make you do it, we're gonna pay for it. However many years ago that was before I even got into school. Well, you know, they chipped away, and we hardly get a percentage from the state now of what it costs to bus. So basically, there's a mandate from the state to bus, and they say, and you're gonna pay for it. So you can start going through here, and you can see the kinds of things that the state passes along, says all schools are required to, and there's money attached to every one of those, whether it be the time for people to put the program together or the report together, requires teachers to teach pupils discipline and respect for others. You know, now, that sounds great. However, somebody has to put that program together, or we have to buy a program, and then we have to prove that we did it, and then we get audited by the ROE, and we have to say, so look at this, I mean, page after page after page. And, you know, your organization, the School Board Association, basically said, for every funded mandate and they oppose every one of them, by the way. I don't care how good it is, when you see the School Board Association and the Superintendents and the Principals Association opposing something, you say, how can they oppose that? Well, it's probably because it's another unfunded mandate that is gonna cost us a lot of money that they think that we ought to do, and I'm not saying it would be a good thing to do, but how much can they give us? Well, they can give us this much, because there's a cost associated to every one of the things on this list.
Right. I was just amazed at all the reports.
Yeah.
That it called for that has to be.
Well, you might look at your treasurer out there, because most of these
Yeah.
reports would have,
But
you know.
one of her done by her.
But there are just, there's many.
Yeah. So when we talk about unfunded mandates, or if somebody asks you, what in the world does that mean? And every department complains about that. That's what we're talking about right there. That's the current list. That was pretty fascinating. Okay, and what else? Oh, state superintendent came and did a visit with us. I think I told you that he was coming. We took him out to Franklin, and JR his morning session was great, and then we showed him a classroom, and he did have a lot of questions. He demanded that it basically be without any fanfare or anything. I said, do you want the press there? No press. He did allow the regional superintendent to come. I think that was a political thing for them too. But anyway, it was a good visit, and he's a really bright guy. And I just appreciate that he's down in Southern Illinois doing this stuff. He spent an hour at Vienna too. We only had him for an hour, and he was on the move. He flew into Kentucky and rented a car, so he was making his rounds down here. And that shows, you know, his interest in the, I guess, the area, you can say. And then actually part of the guys' report that they just did is we're required to report to you the results of our district report card. It is on the website. I give you the district. Every building also has a report card, but I wasn't going to copy every report card. Some of them are over 20 pages and put it together, so please go on the website. Or you can link to it off of our district website, can't you, our school report cards. Or you can go to, you can link to the building, and I assume you guys have one. Tom has it worked out. He's got it on there. I know he does. So that's where your information is. That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions for the superintendent? All right, I see we have no unfinished business. Under new business is the first reading of policies 2.125, 5.190, 6.15, and 6.145.
Okay.
Those are all,
yeah,
packet.
and the big one, of course, is the board member compensation and expenses that somebody with a whole lot of money up in Chicago, some board got into the funds and we're going out of the country for training and stuff. And I mean, so as a consequence, of course, then a rule comes down for everybody. So we're gonna have to follow some new rules as far as, but as I look at this, to be honest with you, the way the expenses are accounted for the trip that you all just took, it doesn't change any of it. The way I said, when you get down into the details of it, we're doing all the stuff that's in the new policy anyway. But apparently there are plenty of policies out there that are not so, anyway, there it is.
Right, so this is just the first reading,
Mhm.
and no action is taken this evening. It'll be on the agenda for approval
Yeah.
next month.
Yeah, and there is from the press, which you are a member of, there are probably 15 or 20 policies in there, so there'll be more coming. But these are the ones that have to be approved by January 1st, so I had to get them in on this meeting.
Next is a resolution estimating the tax levy amount for the 2016 school year.
Okay, I gave you some worksheets on this so you can actually see, you know, it's really formula driven anymore. I used to, when I started, I had a calculator and a ream of paper to go through and do calculations to figure out how to do this with worksheets. But I gave them to you because basically it's really punch in the numbers, and we are a tax cap district, and it will figure your levy for you. You can override some of it. And I'll tell you my overrides, Debbie and I talked about it, so if you look on the page 1 of 2, right in the middle, in the white boxes, it says manual override. And we upped our municipal retirement fund, our social security fund, and our liability fund. But the truth is we don't have to have a truth in taxation because we're below the 5%, but we wouldn't get 5% anyway because we're tax capped. And I think the CPI, did I put it down in there? Yeah, looks like 0.7%, so we won't get the levy. Just for the record, you never get what you levy, but you always over levy in case somebody comes in and builds a super Walmart or something like that. You want to make sure that you capture the growth. So, are there any questions on the levy amounts then? And this would be for the 17-18 budget.
Budget year.
Yes. This is, these amounts will come in next, probably August, to apply to next school year.
easy
what's
now, I'm
going on
telling
there.
you, you just,
I know, but it's still.
levies are easier than they
it
ever
takes-
were.
It still takes a lot of time to get in, but it has been simplified. Any other discussion on the levy?
Yes, yeah, we have to approve our levy.
Okay, so at this time, we'll need a motion to approve, the estimated tax levy for 2016 as approved. Need a motion.
I'll make
Make
that
a motion.
motion.
All right,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Lisa, roll call.
Ms. Grace,
Yes.
Ms. Reggie,
Yes.
Mr. Summer,
Yes.
Mr. Souders,
Yes.
Ms. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, good luck with this. I
Okay.
see arrows all over your.
I know, I hope we don't miss any. Next is the, action, from our executive session. First is the approval of the executive session minutes. You all read over those. Need a motion to approve those as presented.
Well, there'll have to be a correction on the November 1st. I'm sorry, Lisa. The names of the people who
Okay.
screened through the interview will have to be in those minutes.
Okay.
So as correct.
As corrected then. We have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Lisa, roll call.
Ms. Grace,
Yes.
Ms. Reggie.
Yes.
Mr. Summer,
Yes.
Mr. Souders,
Yes.
Ms. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes. Okay, next is new appointment. We have Marilyn Harper, who's part-time special ed, will only be working 2 days a week. And Mary Clayton, who is a MES 6-hour cook. Need a motion to approve this new appointment.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this? Lisa, roll call.
Ms. Grace,
Yes.
Ms. Reggie,
Yes.
Mr. Summer,
Yes.
Mr. Souders,
Yes.
Ms. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes. Okay, now under transfers, Darla Tate, to the vacant 6-hour, or the vacant, 6-hour cook at Brookport. Mary Kennedy, the MCHS head cook, and Terry.
Actually, that
That
isn't
is
head
not-
cook. I'm sorry, I should have taken that
That's
out of
just
there.
MCHS.
That is not head cook, is it?
Yes, Darla was our head cook.
Okay, I had to take one of the, I had head on 2 of them, and I
Mary
must
is
have
the
already
head
taken
cook.
it out, so
Mary
I'm
is-
sorry.
Mary Kennedy took Darla's spot.
Okay, so that is head cook, I'm
Cook
sorry.
position at NCHS, okay. And Terry Torbato is from MES to, Massac Junior High.
And again, that's 6-hour cook.
That's 6-hour cook.
Right. I'm sure
Okay,
that's it.
6-hour cook, okay. Those are just transfers, so no action is needed there.
No, she's not the head cook.
No,
Yeah, that's the one where I had head cook, but I had to take it off, so.
okay, just cook position, okay. The next, under other personnel, Melinda Niehoff, need a motion to approve maternity leave.
So moved.
Thank you,
I'll second.
thank you. Any other discussion? Lisa, roll call.
Ms. Grace,
Yes.
Ms. Reggie,
Yes.
Mr. Summer,
Yes.
Mr. Souders,
Yes.
Ms. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes. And the next two are volunteers. Part of, one is Jarrell Johnson, the basketball volunteer, and the other is Patrick Howe, who is a
football strength and conditioning volunteer. For all volunteers, we still have to approve, so I need a motion to approve these two volunteers at this time.
So
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
any other discussion on this? Roll call. Roll call.
Ms. Grace,
Yes.
Ms. Rushing,
Yes.
Mr. Summer,
Yes.
Mr. Souders,
Yes.
Ms. Steele, Mr. Cook.
Yes. Okay, next, we had two expulsion hearings this evening. What is the number? Do you know?
No, it's a levy.
It's a letter, yeah.
I don't know.
What do you want us to do?
I'll have to look them up.
I was thinking like D, I thought it was gonna be D or E, but I may be wrong.
Well, let's just jump to it.
Okay.
You put
D.
E and F.
G and H, huh?
G and H or
G and
something,
H,
yeah.
okay. First is, motion for, student G, to be held in abeyance, to the Shawnee Alternative School for the remainder of the school year.
Make that motion.
Have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this? Lisa, roll call.
Ms. Grace,
Yes.
Ms. Rushing,
Yes.
Mr. Summer,
Yes.
Mr. Souders,
Yes.
Ms. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes. Next is the, for student H, to be held in abeyance for to the safe schools for a period of 1 year.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Lisa, roll call.
Ms. Grace,
Yes.
Ms. Rushing,
Yes.
Mr. Summer,
Yes.
Mr. Souders,
Yes.
Ms. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes. Any other discussion or any other action that needs to come before the board this evening?
Move we adjourn.
Have a motion to adjourn, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Lisa, roll call.
Ms. Grace,
Yes.
Ms. Rushing,
Yes.
Mr. Summer,
Yes.
Mr. Souders,
Yes.
Ms. Steele,
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Hey, Debbie, you guys, I'm gonna try to get your legal work done so we can get that thing moving on December 19th. That's 3 weeks, okay? That's the plan right now, to get it done for them.
I know.
I know, we've already approved that meeting date.
Sorry. Thank you.